Welcome back again. It's the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe, back for another IDP edition of the Slant, Week 3, about to get underway. It's 6:45 on the East Coast on Thursday evening. We are taping this before the broadcast of the Thursday night game, of course. So, as I always say, make sure you don't fault us for any incorrect predictions, and make sure you give us all the credit for all the correct predictions we have. But of course, by we, I mean me and my co-host Ross Miles, the great, the incomparable Ross Miles. Ross, another week in the books. What's going on, man?
It's not been too bad week, Jeff. The Rams actually won a game. I went 9-3 in fantasy, which is a pretty decent slate considering the amount of injuries we're going to undoubtedly talk about. And right now I'm pondering a Jamal Charles trade, as in I'm the guy who's got Jamal Charles. Should I let him go? So plenty of things to talk about, and obviously we've got injuries that are going to affect tonight as well.
Tough to do. Again, you invest in these players, and especially when you hear reports that this guy's in practice already, it may be tough. It depends on the value you're going to get there, but of course, all the decisions were presented with a multitude. I think I just made up my own word by combining the two. But you're presented with all these challenges throughout the course of the season. And Ross, you just alluded to it, and this is how we're going to start the show. I mean, I think we could do an extended edition. We could do a Ken Burns documentary series on the amount of injuries in the first 2 weeks of the season on the offensive side of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball. But of course, this is an IDP show, so we're going to get into those injuries in greater detail than we did last week. Last week, we kind of ran through them. Honestly, I did not expect to see it continue, but the attrition is mounting. And also, I want to start with a player who, I'm the first to say I really could care less about most cornerbacks in pretty much most IDP leagues where we don't split safeties and cornerbacks. I don't really care about cornerbacks because they're so flaky. Okay, everybody who's running out to grab Antoine Cason right now, talk to me in week 13 and we'll see if it really materialized, because there is a really good chance that this is not going to materialize this season, and it's just really two nice games, two very good games. But we always talk about don't chase last week's production, right? You want to sort of be ahead of the curve, and the safeties will certainly help you do that. But long story short, one cornerback who has given us pretty consistent production for his entire career, Charles Tillman. A great, maybe not a Hall of Famer on the field, but, just an incredible asset for IDP owners. And Charles Tillman, again, out with a torn tricep, second season in a row. Just a tough injury to see, and he'll be placed on injured reserve. But Ross, in these sort of moments of adversity, there is opportunity. And the opportunity certainly came for rookie Kyle Fuller. And it's not like he wasn't playing in the first place. It's not like, okay, hey, Rook, get in there. He was already on the field, but now he gets to replace Tillman, which we kind of figured he was going to be that guy anyway when he was drafted, back in May. And he comes in and he intercepts 2 Colin Kaepernick passes in the fourth quarter. So I guess the question here is now, is this a fluke? Are we expecting, Fuller to come in and just pick up for Tillman? What is your general take on Kyle Fuller, and is this a potential to grab some value at that position going forward?
Yeah, I mean, Fuller is a guy who, if you do play in CB required leagues, especially dynasty leagues, you're probably already aware of. I've rostered him in a few leagues, so he's definitely a guy I like. He was one of the top draft picks coming out. So yeah, I mean, I like him. Obviously, the 2 interceptions, he had 5 solos and 2 assists as well, so he's putting up some numbers. He is going to replace Tillman in the lineup, albeit maybe I'm not sure if he's going to replace him directly. I don't know if you've got any further news on that, how they've been splitting them out in a camp this week, but I do like him. But the point you make, Jeff, is about picking up cornerbacks. Unless you find a cornerback who has a specific role on the team which gives him that extra value, as in maybe they see some snaps as a safety here and there, or maybe they get used in a linebacker in a package, or there has to be some kind of special reason why that cornerback stands out. Otherwise, even in this case, I think in redraft leagues I'd leave him sitting on the waiver wire. I wouldn't make a big jump for him.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the other direction, and I'm in a league where you certainly get some decent points for interceptions, but you only start one defensive back. I went with Fuller. I actually picked him up this week. I know that's kind of crazy over some of the safety options. Now there's a lot of teams in the league, but I grabbed Fuller because with him you get a bit of the upside of passes defense and interceptions. Because let's face it, we see this every year. It's incredibly rare for a rookie to come into the league and just be a shutdown corner. That's something that does take time. Okay, we've seen wide receivers now making that leap in their first or second year. It's not the third year anymore. But there are certain positions where it does take time. Defensive end, cornerback. I mean, every year we see these cornerbacks come into the league, rookies. Sometimes corners we haven't even really anticipated being values in IDP, who see just boatloads of targets. You look at the end of the year, they have 115 targets thrown into their coverage or something crazy like that. I think they could be Fuller this year, and he's obviously a very good tackler. I mean, arguably, I looked at this draft class in terms of cornerbacks and who would have the most value, and for me it came down to Jason Verrett and Kyle Fuller, and I kind of leaned Fuller a little over Verrett, but it was really close. He's got the opportunity now, and so I think it's the prime time to pounce. I am anti-cornerback for the most part, and everybody knows that. But this is one case where I'm going to make an exception to the rule. I like it. Now, hey, you can take my point, you can take Ross's point, but, we both obviously have our perspectives there. Now, in terms of another injury situation, let's call it, we saw Vontaze Burfict leave in week 1 with a concussion or stinger, who knows, and then he makes it back. What practice reports? Oh no, he's not practicing. Then he makes it back through the concussion protocol, and he plays. And then boom, he gets essentially hit twice, 2 different times. And then it's reported, okay, it's a stinger. And then news released that he is in the league concussion protocol. 2 weeks in a row. You don't like that. You don't like that he's in the concussion protocol. We've seen that this year it is a little bit more stringent to get through that protocol. You Jonathan Cyprien owners, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm kind of curious as to how Burfict made it through the first go-round. I'm not optimistic he makes it through this week, the second go-round. I don't know if they really need to rush him in this game against Tennessee, so I would really prepare as if Burfict isn't playing. Now, with that being the case, we know, obviously, Emmanuel Lamore is really the guy to have there. He's going to be the most value. But if you want to scoop a little value, you could possibly get something out of Vincent Ray. But Ross, I mean, okay, is this something you would do if you're a Burfict owner? Would you go Vincent Ray against this Tennessee Titans team that last week kind of got manhandled by a Dallas defense that we've been talking about not necessarily being the strongest defense? Or would you maybe try and look elsewhere? Like, how would you approach this if you're a Burfict owner?
Yeah, I definitely think that Burfict sits this week. I think the team, they gave him a big contract in the off-season. I think they've got to play this smart and sit him for a couple of weeks. Vincent Ray is the guy to be attacking because he did put up numbers, and he has put up numbers in the past playing that role. So it's a very easy, direct replacement. So yeah, he's definitely on my target list. I mean, there are some other guys I would have mentioned this week in the waiver wire article. If they're still there, like Lamore is obviously one who you mentioned. Brandon Marshall's another. So there are a few guys potentially kicking around out there. Maybe Rolando McClain, although we're probably going to mention him in this week's injury report as well. So there are guys, but Vincent Ray, direct replacement. I think you know what you're going to get.
Yeah, it worries me if the Titans can't generate much offense. You may want to kind of fade that. There might not be enough tackles to go around. I mean, last week a good performance out of McClain, but seven total tackles, 5 solos. Yeah, he had the sack, he had the miraculous interception, but you can't count on sacks and interceptions. You really want that tackle floor to be nice and high, and I don't know if it's going to be there for Vincent Ray. And then let's not forget this as well. The Bengals going on to bye in week 4. All the stars sort of aligned for Burfict to kind of, okay, let's sit him, let's make sure he's good to go, because this team's good, and this team's going to make a push as they have the recent seasons here. They're going to make a postseason push, and they need their stud on defense. So prepare if you are a Burfict owner. If you're a John Beeson owner, you were playing with fire. You were asking for it. A glutton for punishment, I guess you could say, because it's never a matter of if, it's a matter of when John Beeson will get hurt. We saw it happen in OTAs. We saw it happen again. Last week he re-aggravates the foot, and he's out indefinitely. I don't know if he's even worth rostering. I know, hey, last year when he comes over to the Giants, he puts up that massive game. Part of that might have been just adrenaline. Who knows? I mean, not to say that that he's not a skilled player, and he's certainly the most talented linebacker on that team. But boy, oh boy, there are so many other options, especially in an injury-plagued season. You don't want an injury-prone player. And so how do we pick up the pieces here in New York? Well, Jaquan Williams has been the every down player all season. All 2 games. All season, all 2 games. He's been the every down player. That's not going to change. And then we're going to see Jameel McClain slide into the middle, possibly see some sub-package snaps. McClain saw sub-package snaps back in his days with Baltimore, so but you know what you get with McClain, very, very, very low ceiling. I don't know, outside of the very deepest leagues, you're probably not going to want to deal with him very much at all. And then we'll see potentially Spencer Pasinger out there. Herzlich got some snaps. Mark Herzlich got some snaps when Beeson went out, but I mean he looked really rough in coverage, so I don't expect to see him out there. But Pasinger, and you're not going to get anything there. But Ross, I mean, Jaquan Williams, I mean, is there anything to be had here for IDP owners?
I mean, there was a period last year when he put up a decent stat line. I ended up picking up in a really tackle-heavy, quite deep league. Yeah, he doesn't really push my buttons. I think you're probably going to find better alternatives. I mean, I know we've just talked about how maybe Tennessee can't sustain a drive, but I would still prefer Vincent Ray over him.
So, and that's pretty telling. Really kind of where we're situating this guy, and I don't know. I haven't actually sort of sat down and ranked these two like that would happen. I mean, I still technically have Perfect ranked right now on Thursday. If, obviously we get wind, if that changes, then we put Ray in there. But he probably would be in that same area. I'd have to agree with you because there's just not much there for Jaquan Williams to move him up very high. It's strange to say that too because I'd really like to see, I'd like to say I can put that every down linebacker as an LB3, but he's more almost borderline LB3 just because he has that extremely low ceiling. Now, a player with a much higher ceiling, a player that Ross you like, a player that I certainly liked in the preseason, and the player who did not look very good in Week 1, Brad Jones, sat out in Week 2, dealing with a quad injury, didn't practice last week. And we end up seeing Jamari Lattimore get the start. A.J. Hawk plays the every down role. Lattimore goes sort of into the A.J. Hawk role where he gets some sub-package snaps. But, Ross, did you happen to get a chance to see Lattimore? I rewatched this game, and, he really does stand out to me. And maybe it was just the first game for Jones, or maybe that's just who Jones is. But I was not very impressed by Jones whatsoever. And I was impressed by Lattimore. So, what are your thoughts about just this whole situation? Are you still hanging on to that idea that Brad Jones can be a viable, even not even an LB3, but maybe even a viable LB2?
I am, Jeff. Maybe it's because I kind of believe, and I think as plenty of coaches believe it as well, you shouldn't lose a job through injury. I think Jones will be given the chance to win that job back properly and take over the playing, in every down linebacker role. And if he does that, he has the potential to put up LB2 numbers, even at his worst. I think he's an LB3 in that system, playing every down. So, yeah, I mean, if he continues playing poorly, he could definitely lose that job to Lattimore because he's going to need to keep showing it. And obviously, say Lattimore was impressive last week.
Now let's move over and maybe just to backtrack to that. I do think that we ultimately see Lattimore come in and possibly take this job, but that's just again, that's just sort of my take on this one. But hey, we'll believe it when we see it. And to those hearing in the background, yes, that is my beagle barking in the background, if you can possibly hear that. But either way, that's what beagles do. They bark. And what we do is we talk about football, and right now we're talking about injuries. So one more. Jonathan Cyprien was sidelined with the concussion. The good news is that he did get through that protocol. We saw Josh Evans get the start for the Jags and rack up 14 total tackles. Cyprian owners, I feel your pain. I am one of you as well. But either way, the good news is when he does get back on the field, we are going to see Cyprian. I mean, hey, Cyprian might be the key to this defense because think about this. Against the Eagles, when Cyprian was in there, the Jags looked pretty good. Then Cyprian goes out, and they look horrendous. So maybe he's one of the sort of like the linchpin to that defense. So either way, we're expecting to see him back. But boy, Ross, Paul Posluszny not practicing. Not good to have an elite level linebacker who may not see the field. And I don't think there's anything of value. Do you think there's anything of value if is there like as you would say, a cheeky play here if Paul Posluszny does not play?
I don't know. Probably not, Jeff. I think there's probably people around, but we keep on saying that. But the amount of injuries we've got going on here, a lot of waiver wire guys are going to get picked up. I mean, I'm still scanning my eyes down this list and thinking we could probably still cover a good 5 or 6 guys at linebacker, like Koa Misi. Will he be back this week? Michael Kendricks, status unknown. Jamie Collins, that one scares me a lot at the minute as well, Jeff, because Jamie Collins has a big effect on that defense in the way that Ninkovich and Chandler Jones get used. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest question marks of the week for me. Is Jamie Collins going to play, and how does that affect Ninkovich and Chandler Jones?
Yeah, I mean, and just to kind of transition over to that, hey, let's put it this way. Collins doesn't go. They kick Hightower inside. They move Chandler Jones from that unfriendly, from a fantasy standpoint, 5 technique position to the outside linebacker position, and then boom, like a completely different defense shows up. And, obviously Chandler Jones has the massive block kick return for a touchdown, but he has 2 sacks. He has a bunch of tackles. Hightower has 2 sacks. He has a bunch of tackles. They looked awesome. And now what do you do? To me, that was a better defense. Now, I know they love Jamie Collins out there, but if you put Jamie Collins out there and you still insist on having Hightower on the field, there's not enough room for everybody. Somebody has to go. I mean, does that mean that Ninkovich is now off the field? I know they really like him, so I don't see that happening. So this is a really tough situation just in general. But, for fantasy purposes, you have to like Chandler Jones playing outside linebacker if you have him at defensive end. I mean, that's awesome. So hopefully somehow they figure out a way to keep doing that. I don't know how to answer the question about Jamie Collins. We just have to keep a close eye. It's, again, you say Michael Kendricks. Okay, it sounds like he's going to play. Is he going to play? I don't know. That injury on Monday night looked a lot worse than it actually ended up being, so that's a good thing. But if Michael Kendricks doesn't go, let's start Alfred Morris. I mean, come on, that's going to be insane. They couldn't stop anything. Even they couldn't really stop much when Kendricks was in there, and then when he's out, it was brutal watching Trent Richardson run all over the Eagles. I mean, just a tough one there. And then you mentioned Koamisi. Okay, well the whole Dolphin situation is a mess as well. Donnell Ellerbe gone. Philip Wheeler managed to get back on the field, and he basically proved what we thought. He's not going to play every down. They're not going to trust him in every down. It's just not going to happen. So that means it looks like if Misi gets back, he said he's supposed to be back this week, he's going to be in every down. That leaves us with 2 other players. Jason Trusnick, who played every snap last week, and Jelani Jenkins, who played 57 of 59 snaps last week. I know everybody loves Jenkins, love the numbers, but don't forget, that's a Buffalo stat line, folks, so it's always going to be inflated. But still, it was a nice game. But Trusnick looked really good as well. Trusnick put up decent numbers as well. And you know what I've observed in the past, and I've had some dialogue with some of you guys on Twitter, especially you guys who are really plugged in with the Dolphins. I know, hey, I like Jenkins too. I hope Jenkins is out there. But what I keep seeing every time with the Dolphins is they go to Trusnick first as their fourth. They were going to him as their 4th man. Anytime any of one of those guys was missing, and this goes back to last season as well, they put Trusnick in. So I'm a little worried that Trusnick is the guy. I'm not saying he's the guy. I'm not saying Jenkins is the guy. I'm just saying this week I don't know if I can necessarily trust just plugging Jenkins in and just assuming that he's the starter. Unless we get definitive word, and of course if I do get definitive word or if Ross gets definitive word, we're tweeting that out right away. But right now, I mean, we don't really have that. So Ross, I mean, your thoughts about some of these guys? I know I'm rambling on and on here, getting really fired up, but your thoughts on, the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles is a scary situation. If they have to replace Kendricks with Casey Matthews, I mean, don't go and pick Casey Matthews up. Don't do it. It's a waste of a roster spot. He's not going to last. He's never looked good when he's on the field, and I've seen him. That defense definitely needs Kendricks back on the field. I hope you're right, Jeff. I know he had an MRI, status unknown. The Dolphins, again, yeah, you said a messy situation. Trosnick versus Jenkins. Yeah, the Buffalo stat line, as you so accurately pointed out, did pad those stats. We definitely need some clarity before we can make a call going forward. I mean, if you're trying to talk about plugging in Jenkins or Trosnick as maybe an LB3, or perhaps if you're in a really deep league, an LB4, I think I could sort of go with that, but you're taking a little bit of a risk. Like you said, it'd be much better if we knew the status of these players. And yeah, the situation in New England is just giving me a headache. I like Ninkovich. I own him in a couple of leagues, but I'm of the opinion if Collins is on the field, Ninkovich won't be on the field as an every down defensive end sort of hybrid. Whatever happens, Chandler Jones is a great player, but obviously the more snaps you see outside linebacker from him, the more value he has. So Hightower, I'm still kind of steering clear from. I definitely want to see this defense play more snaps and more games consistently before I can commit to Hightower. I've seen too many hijinks with the way Belichick moves his linebackers around. Got a couple more linebackers, Jeff. I know we've been talking about injuries for ages, but I think there's at least two more we should probably mention. One of them being Mason Foster, who dislocated his shoulder, and the other one being Chad Greenway, who broke his hand. Now, neither of those sound particularly good for linebackers that make interceptions. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, and this is tough, and obviously, you're listening to this. Listening to this after the Thursday night game. Mason Foster didn't play. I mean, that. Not a big shocker here, but I think the implication here is more important for the long term. Dislocated shoulder. That's not necessarily the most benign of injuries. And okay, there's reports. Oh, it's only going to be the week, or I don't know if I buy that. And that's tough. That's tough because hey, we finally get Foster in this every down role. You probably got him in a nice scoop, nice value on draft day. You like that. You're sitting here and there's going to be tons of tackles this year, and then boom, injury. Just like on the offensive side of the ball, just like we've all got hit already this year. If you somehow avoided the minefield, I mean, that's incredible because I don't know of anybody who hasn't gotten impacted by at least one injury so far. And I don't know if he's going to be back quickly. It's going to be very interesting, and of course you already know the results to this when you're listening, but it's going to be interesting to watch just how they handle this. My suspicion is, okay, obviously this is great for Levante David's numbers. It's not great for this Bucs defense. This Bucs defense is falling apart, losing Adrian Claiborne for the season, losing Michael Johnson sitting out last week, Gerald McCoy breaking his hand. That's rough. All of that's rough. Proceed with caution. Now, the other injury, Chad Greenway, I haven't heard much out of the Greenway camp at all, from the Vikings. Obviously, a completely different story has dominated the news, but maybe I'll get to that in a moment for IDP purposes. But there's a chance he could play with a club cast. I mean, it's not like he's a running back. We've seen players in the past play with club casts. Patrick Willis years ago, Sean Lee 2 seasons ago. We see this over and over again, so that's not out of the realm of possibility. If you have Chad Greenway, you're not going to get that much of a dip in production in terms of tackles, but in the same right, you may want to still probably be hedging your bets elsewhere if you can possibly scoop some of these players. I get, and Ross, you're probably getting this too. People will say, "Oh, can you help me make a waiver wire pick?" And I can't just randomly spout them out without knowing your wire. But then I have back and forth with people on Twitter. Well, my wire is pretty thin. It's a deep league, blah blah blah. And then I'll be like, "Well, tell me some players," and they'll name they'll be like, "Oh, well, Preston Brown's there." It's like, okay, then pick him up, right? Like, or Emmanuel Lamore's there. Oh, go then grab him. it's not dire. There's going to be plenty of players available, but I might be hedging my bets a little bit in that situation. And Ross, I alluded to the really just tough domestic violence situation that has been playing out in the NFL. Certainly a negative cloud that is hanging over the league right now. But it's not really our place as fantasy analysts to maybe make some commentary. I know everybody wants to add their 2 cents in, and there's a time and place for that, but not on this show particularly. This show, we really want to look at the offshoot, the byproduct. We're not going to look on the offensive side, though you probably already know all that very well. We do have one particular player, a very fantasy relevant player, who has been impacted on the defensive side of the ball, and that's Greg Hardy. Now, Greg Hardy convicted of domestic violence in the offseason, played in week 1. Then, after the proverbial hit the fan, with Ray Rice, with Peterson, with all of this going on, the Panthers wisely deactivated him. And I don't know when we're going to see him again. I have no clue whatsoever. This could be a very long-term thing. This could be a relatively short-term thing. But if you drafted him, you should prepare like it's going to be a long-term thing. Now, last week, we saw Mario Addison have a pretty nice game. 2.5 sacks. I mean, he was all over the place. But I think it was a bit of product of the matchup because he actually didn't play every down. They had Coney Ailey also rotating in with him. He saw a bunch of snaps in the game. So I don't know if it's just simply, go out and pick up Mario Addison, and now all of a sudden you have the year's breakout DL2 or something like that. I don't think it's just that simple. What I will say, though, Ross, and get this, I can't actually let the show go any further without saying this. I'm in a league where somebody dropped Robert Quinn. Just let that marinate for a second.
Pardon?
I am in a league where somebody dropped Robert Quinn.
Can I join your league?
What's that?
Is it for money? Is it for money? Can I play?
It is a money league, actually. It's not. I mean, a jelly bean league. It's not a sizable high stakes fantasy league. But yeah, there's a few shekels on the line for the league, and somebody dropped Robert Quinn. Now, I never drafted a defensive lineman early, so I have no chance of getting Robert Quinn in this kind of league. I have a claim in for Robert Quinn, which will be processed hopefully before anybody listens to this show. It'll be processed sometime this evening, whenever waivers go through, probably after midnight or whatever. But either way, that is a knee-jerk reaction. That is one of those reactions we talked about last week. Okay, has he had a sack yet? No. Has he looked awesome? Yes, he's looked awesome. Watch the games, folks. It's not like Robert Quinn all of a sudden forgot how to rush the passer. It's not like he's out there going through the motions, taking plays off, just kind of hanging out. I'm here for the paycheck and the scenery, folks. No, he's awesome. He's so disruptive. And the sacks are going to come. And we saw last year that when they come in bunches, and they come with forced fumbles, and they come with all kinds of tackles. So there are going to be people who have knee-jerk reactions. So if you're in a situation, you drafted Hardy, okay, that is not fun. But in the same right, there are opportunities because people in your league will have knee-jerk reactions after 2 weeks of no production. And remember, I always say that these first 2 weeks are essentially preseason week number 5 and 6. The season really doesn't get going until about week 3, and that's where we start to see a lot of these, the cream, if you will, rise to the top. So there are opportunities out there. Ross, any other? I'm sure we missed injuries. Any others on your list?
Eric Berry, I guess. Huge. I mean, there's probably a few others, but I think Berry should probably be the last one to mention. Obviously, sprained his ankle. He's questionable this week. He was our number 1 defensive back last week, so that really hurt us at Fantasy Pros for our rankings.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. Didn't practice at least on Wednesday. Didn't get to see the Thursday practice reports just yet, but either way, that's not a huge shock that he didn't practice. But keep a close eye here. I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna see him go. And so if you have him, that's a tough blow because it's a great situation for him to put up tons of numbers. We ranked him that way. Not on a whim. We ranked him that way because he's in a great situation. Like we expected, we saw Josh Malga playing every down. We saw James Michael Johnson coming off the field in the dime situations. Now, I don't know, and that's another situation maybe we should talk about before we get to matchups. What are the Chiefs going to ultimately do when Joe Mays comes back? My speculation is that we're going to see Malga continue to play every down, but some people have said that they think James Michael Johnson will do that role and Mays will go back to the Joe Mays role, which means run around like a maniac and hopefully guess right in a two-down situation. Boy, Joe Mays hits hard, but sometimes he over pursues, he misses, he guesses wrong. And so watch him closely. You'll see what I mean. But when he hits, oh boy. Now, either way, I can't see that happening because why wouldn't they just be playing James Michael Johnson in every down right now? Either way, it's a situation that you kind of don't really want a piece of, and you really only want a piece of Barry if he does get in there. If you own him, you're keeping a close eye on that situation. Now, Ross, I just want to just really briefly touch on a few performances, though, before we get into matchups, and maybe I know you have a couple as well from week 2 to sort of how we did last week. Are we buying this? Are we not buying this? What's going on? And the one of the stat lines that sticks out to me when I was looking through all the numbers is Bernard Pollard putting up 11 total 10 solo tackles, a sack. Zach Brown sidelined for the season with that torn pec. Xavier Gooden was only playing in the base. George Wilson coming out and playing nickel linebacker, and Pollard put up these massive numbers. So we were talking about this last week with Barry. Are we going to see the same sort of thing here? Is this a year where Pollard maybe has a career year with tackles? And then that's nothing shabby, nothing too shabby there because he always puts up decent tackle numbers. But are you kind of buying this? No, he's not going to have 10, 11 total tackles every week, but still as maybe more of a higher-end DB1 than we had him in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think in quite a lot of these situations, Jeff, where we're seeing linebackers go down, we should definitely be bumping some of these safeties. For me, Pollard, preseason and first couple of weeks, I probably had him in that kind of 10 to 14 range, but I think now you've got to slide him up a couple of spots. I don't know if I'd push him quite as high as 5, 6, but 7 to 12, right at the bottom of the DB1 tier for me. Another safety I wanted to touch on, another one with 10 solo tackles, Tyvon Branch. He's a guy I've been banging on about, and it definitely seems to me that he's living up to the expectations from all those years when he put up triple digit tackles.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is partially the product of just the whole situation. What do we always say? What's the formula for defensive back production in IDP? Poor linebacker play. Suspect linebackers is exactly what you're looking for. And let's go back to last week. C.O. Moore, my buddy, looked pretty good, right? And then, of course, he's another person we could have been talking about with injuries. He didn't play the whole game. Keep a close eye on that. But if Moore plays, you're obviously starting him. Hey, this guy could be easily an LB2, if not maybe better this year. But Ross, Miles Burris, your boy, with your namesake there, was horrendous against the run. This is the whole reason why, anybody who was asking me in the preseason and you're saying, why aren't you ranking Miles Burris? That's why. Because he's not going to stick once Nick Roach comes back. He was arguably the worst run-defending linebacker in Week 2, and that's a week where Casey Matthews played, okay? It was that bad. There were tons of tackles, so as long as Burris is there, and I haven't heard about Nick Roach getting through this concussion protocol yet, so Burris could play again. And, hey, if C.O. Moore sits, then we have Mayava out there too. Oh, boy, this could be a huge week for Tyvon Branch against the Patriots. So I'm buying that, at least as long as the linebacker play remains suspect. Once you get Roach out there and more, we might see that those numbers start to come back down to earth a little bit for Branch. But I buy it. Now, Ross, another one, though, maybe we don't. I don't know. Deshaun Goldson, another strong week, 11 total tackles, 9 solo. Are you buying Deshaun Goldson? Is this guy finally putting it all together?
He's one who I mentioned in the waiver wire, Jeff, and kind of mentioned him. And the more I wrote about him, I was like, I don't know if I can I'm writing this, but do I believe? I mean, the thing with Goldson, he's had one fantasy relevant season in his career. You can look through the stats. He rarely puts more than 65 total tackles in a season. He does pick a few picks, but it all depends on his usage. I think he's getting in the box a little bit more than usual. But I am being a little bit wary, and I'm sure you've got some information about the stat crew he was getting some points from.
Yeah, it's I mean a more favorable venue in Tampa, so that's sort of what you have there. Target Tampa as a venue. Next time they play at home, it's a little while from now. They're going to play in week 6. I'm off the top of my head here. Week 6, Baltimore. And no, I don't memorize the entire schedule. That would be really impressive. But that one I did have in the notes earlier. So target that venue. It's a nice venue for tackle production, and Levante David owners can do backflips over that one. But I'm not buying this. I mean, yeah, he's in the DB3 radar, but Ross and I talk about this all the time. There's 30 defensive backs in the DB3 radar, so he's in that sort of area, but don't run out and just simply assume. Like I was saying with Antoine Cason earlier, don't just run out and assume, okay, these guys put up massive numbers. I mean, hey, if you put up 10 tackles a week, you're going to put up 160 tackles. Like for a cornerback, that would break all records. Like it's an insane amount of tackles. It's just not possible. So I'm not buying that one. But how about this Calais Campbell guy? He puts up a goose egg in week 1. Then he goes out and has 10 solo tackles for a defensive end, along with a sack. Of course, it comes against the Giants. What are you doing with Calais Campbell, Ross?
I was going to say, Jeff, if you suited up as a strong safety for the Cleveland Browns, you'd be a DB3. But Calais Campbell, yeah, I mean that's just typical knee-jerk reaction stuff. If you were like, oh, Kerrigan this, Campbell this, Campbell that, this is a guy who's a lock for a DL1 nearly every single season because of his tackle floor. This is a guy who's going to put up 50, 60 total tackles and approach double-digit sacks, and that kind of production is a DL1 year in year out. We've cautioned people show after show, year after year, don't make knee-jerk reactions about DL1s, Robert Quinn included, and Calais Campbell.
And J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt, a rare goose egg on the defensive side of the ball. He had a swing and a miss. It wasn't his best performance. It wasn't his best statistical performance. It wasn't his best performance on the field. But he's still J.J. Watt. And he caught a touchdown pass. Come on, you got to give him something for that. I know there were some leagues out there, by the way, who don't give him credit for that. To me, that's absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, if that is your league, then you need to raise a fuss with your commissioner. Get that changed for next season because you should get all the points that you score. Every player should get every point they score. And the guy caught a touchdown pass. Come on, that was awesome. Somewhere Mike Vrabel smiled when that took place. But either way,
so can I cut in, Jeff? Sorry, I'm trying to cut in. I was watching NFL AM this morning, and I believe Vrabel is a coach down there now because LeVar Arrington brought it up, I think, and they were kind of hinting that. Yeah, I think that's what he said. I was obviously I'm at work trying to watch NFL AM, but I'm pretty sure LeVar brought it up because of the fact Vrabel was involved. I'm not sure.
That would make sense. I'm actually, trying to pull this up as we're speaking here, and let's see, is he a linebackers coach? Yeah, and it would make sense because Bill O'Brien, the Patriots connection. So yeah, he's a linebackers coach in Houston. So there you go. It's tough to keep track of all these coaching changes.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a great site out there called Coaching Roots. If you're ever, super bored, I don't know, or you want to search around and find the origin, where coaches have come from and who they coach with, and all of that. It's just you can fall into the vortex, the sort of rabbit's hole of coaches and where they came from. Such an awesome site. But yeah, that's awesome. Absolutely have to love the sort of Vrabel-esque play right there. Ross, one more player before we get to matchups, and I kind of want to just see your general take on this. Big number that stuck out: Jasper Brinkley, 11 total tackles, 8 solo. Are you believing it?
I want to see it happen again. I mean, we talked for a while about the Minnesota inside linebacker. Who's going to play that role? We obviously went back and forth. I was in the Cole camp. You were not in the Cole camp. Seems like Brinkley's won that job for the time being, but is he going to keep it? I mean, didn't they pick? No, it was the Cardinals who picked up Des Bishop. But I mean, didn't they kick the tires on Des Bishop? So I'm not sure. I mean, I think we're of the same opinion that Brinkley isn't a great player. He's a thumper. He's going to have weeks when he puts up decent numbers, but is he going to produce that week in, week out? I have serious doubts.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And he only played a 2-down role. I think he played something like 60% of the snaps, which is decent. It's not like they were in sub-package defense for most of the game, like you would see against like the Philadelphia or something like that. But you can't expect that all the time. And just to clarify, Desmond Bishop actually he's a free agent now, so I would expect there's players like this who, with all of this attrition, we may see on the field, and who knows? Part of me still longs for Desmond Bishop to have gotten a couple more full seasons in, because he just at one point there really had it all. But alas, he's still somewhere around. Who knows? Maybe he'll get a look in the coming weeks here. But yeah.
So I was going to say, Rolando McClain just got another shot. So surely Desmond Bishop gets another shot.
Yeah, there's a 6-year difference between those two players. Bishop now on the wrong side of 30. He turned 30 back in July, so yeah, it's on the downward spiral. But you never know. I even heard.
I'm older than that man, and you're just telling him he's on the downward spiral.
In football, hey, I tell people all the time. That's why I'm holding on for dear life for Peyton Manning and Tom Brady to stay in football, because they're two of the only players who are older than me still. Back in the day, it was great. Jamie Moyer, a baseball player, was able to play like until his mid 40s. But football, hey, you're over 30. It's tough. I mean, it's you have plenty of life ahead of you, but not in the game. It's a young man's game. We know that. And Rolando McClain, that's one thing he does certainly have on his side. He's got the youth on his side, so you have to like that. Now, speaking of likes, I'm going to go into some players we like for the week, some players we don't like for the week. So I'll toss this over to you, Ross. Why don't you just go through? You can go through all of them. The players you like this week and why you like them.
All right, I'm going to start with the cheap shot, and obviously you're the guy who collects the tackle data, but anyone who plays at Buffalo at any point, so that means this week San Diego Chargers, so we're going to go Eric Weddle, Donald Butler, obviously Bradham and Brown. I mean, I think Preston Brown's a 3-down linebacker, so you have to prefer him over Bradham. Cersei is also going to be playing in that game. Mante Te'o is a one I'm just keeping on the cusp. If you're in a deep league, obviously we're talking about a stat crew that gives out tackles for fun. So Te'o in deep leagues, and maybe Corey Legit. I mean, Corey Legit has been decent on the sack front, but give him a few extra tackles and that's probably a DL2 game. So I'm going to go with all of those guys in that one. Obviously, we watched Jacksonville give up 10 sacks last week. So the first thing I did was, who's playing Jacksonville? Indianapolis. Damn, there are 3-4. Who's going to rush the passer? There's no Robert Mathis. Do I fancy Eric Walden? Not really. So I guess D'Qwell Jackson, maybe he can pad some sacks with a sack. One sack on top of a 8 total tackle day would be a pretty decent performance. So I like him. And then let's talk about some defensive ends. Now, we've talked about Robert Quinn during the show as not performing, or at least being dropped with his 0 sacks. This week he comes up against Dallas, who have allowed 5 sacks, the second most there. Sorry, their O-line's allowed 5 sacks, the second most in the league. So Quinn could well have a big day. Ziggy Ansah against Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, that line lets him get knocked to the turf on a regular basis. They've given up 5 sacks this year. Ansah could well have a decent game against Green Bay. Charles Johnson I'm picking out as well. We've obviously talked about the issues with the Panthers and who they're missing at defensive end well. He plays most of his snaps at left end, and right tackle for Washington is Tyler Columbus, who's given up 4 sacks according to our data so far this season. So perhaps Charles Johnson can rejoin the DL1 tier. Couple of safeties. Again, I'm just looking for those kind of hot matchups. So we're talking Burnett against Detroit. Obviously, we expect the Lions to pass it all day long. Harrison Smith against New Orleans. Obviously, we expect the Saints to pass all day long. And then we've already kind of touched on the safety duo for Oakland against New England, Tyvon Branch and Charles Woodson. So they should have some pretty decent days. As far as dislikes go,
Well, hold
There's,
on. I got to get my likes in there first. We'll go into the dislikes in a second here.
let's do it.
A couple things to clarify, though. Carolina's not playing Washington. They're playing who are they playing?
Did I get
Uh,
that one wrong?
no, because the Eagles are. I know the Eagles are playing Washington in
Of
this.
course they are. I don't know how I pulled that one out.
Yeah, and then the other one, and so that matchup too. I looked at it. It's not going to be Fletcher Cox. He's going to be against Trent Williams, so not really that good. Trent Williams is really good, so that's not the best of matchups there, and you're kind of not going to be able to get much on the other side. Um, and just keep in mind that if you have Ziggy Ansah, just keep an eye on the injury report. He's another one who's on that injury report. We didn't even mention Jarrell Freeman because you mentioned DeQuell Jackson. I do like DeQuell Jackson there. Jarrell Freeman doesn't look like he may make the field again, so that means we'll see Josh McNary. But real quick, I don't have as many as Ross does, so I'm just going to go through them. I had Donald Butler on my list as well. I love Donald Butler this week. It's a fantastic play in a fantastic venue that continues to be tackle heavy. So you're going to like that. We mentioned Tyvon Branch. I do love Tyvon Branch against New England. This is an interesting game just for a number of reasons. I mean, this is a game you want to start as many New England players as possible. And that's on the offensive side of the ball. If you were kind of worried about Tom Brady, this might be the week where we see Tom Brady break out of the funk. It has been a funk. The only starting quarterback who's completed less of his passes is Chad Henne, who started both games. So that's not good. I like Mario Williams this week against San Diego. You might not realize this, but Mario Williams has 2 sacks already. He's had a sack each week. It's such a quiet stat line. But he'll be facing DJ Fluker. DJ Fluker did not look good last week. Struggled against Michael Bennett. And so, as opposed to Cliff Averill, who faced King Dunlap, King Dunlap looks really good this year. The switch is flipped on. So, more about that in a second. I also like Larry Foote against the 49ers. This guy's going to be for real this year. Now, keep in mind, you picked Larry Foote up this week. He's on bye next week, so, hey, you're going to have to deal with that, navigate that as you will. But somebody has to make the tackles. Foote has proven he's going to do a decent enough job. It's not going to be, maybe Carlos Dansby production from last year, but you still have to like the production you're going to get out of this guy. It could end up being an LB2 season. That would not shock me. So, hey, get him in there against a run-heavy team. Got to like that. Now, Ross, let's get those dislikes and wrap this thing up.
It's funny you mentioned Mario Williams. I'm not calling him a dislike this week, but in the article that we're going to be posting of mine in the next 24 hours, I do mention Mario Williams as a guy to be a little bit wary about. He has got 2 sacks, but he's only created something like 6 pressures or 7 pressures, and he's basically converting. I think he's converting 40% of his pressures into sacks, which is a pretty unsustainable number. Small sample size, but something to be a little bit wary of. One of the guys I'm going to note down as a negative is Fletcher Cox, who you touched on just now, based on the fact he's only had 1 hit in something like 60 pass rushes. He's got something like a 1.6% pressure ratio to pass rushes, and that is awful. All of his points have come off his touchdown. Steer clear of this guy. Sell, sell, sell. Jared Allen, another guy I'm being really wary of. Only 4 pressures so far this season. I'm steering away from sort of more matchups this time. I'm sort of looking at player performances. So Allen's a guy I'm a little bit nervous about. Vontez Burfict I've got as a note down. Obviously we've discussed why, because of the injury status. I think you've got to be really careful. Again, we've covered it quite extensively. Ninkovic, we've got to be really careful. It all depends on Collins. If Collins plays, Ninkovic is probably a dodgy one. If he doesn't play, he'll play an every down role, I believe. And then the final one, and it pains me to say it, Brian Cushing, I think you have to be really careful as well. He still hasn't won the 3-down rollback, the every down rollback since his injury. I do believe he will win. I was asked several times on Twitter this week, what should I know about Cushing? My answer is keep him or trade for him at a cheap price. I'm a massive fan. I do think he's an every down linebacker of LB1 potential. He just needs to get his feet back under him.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I've been actually, as we're recording this, somebody was asking me about Cushing if he should be picked up. Somebody to monitor, but yeah, Mike Muhammad's coming in there, and you can't like that if you're a Cushing owner. So for now, it's tough. You got to almost bump him down into that LB3 range. But guys I don't like, I was talking about the other side of that matchup. with San Diego and Buffalo, and this is an interesting game for a number of reasons for fantasy purposes. We love the tackles there, but this matchup is not good for Jerry Hughes. I think Jerry Hughes has looked really strong so far this season. Very sneaky type IDP player, but not this week against King Dunlap, who is a massive man, by the way. I just don't like this. King Dunlap has looked really good so far. Maybe not the best pass-blocking left tackle, but he's right up there so far this season. You just want to fade Hughes this week. Joplo Bartu, I want to see how that worked out. I had it on my list. I know it's the game tonight, but I really want to see how this works out. Hopefully, and let's predict this, I'm going to predict that we'll see again what we saw last week. I know this is very dangerous, but that was a split between Bartu and Shembo, which means Bartu is not going to have value. But 2 Sunday games left. I'm going to go back to that Bills-San Diego game, and I'm going to say I don't want to play any of these Bills linebackers because I don't know how to trust the situation. I think Brown is the player to own, but I still want to see it, especially when Rivers comes back. It looks like they're going to have a hard time keeping Brown off the field. They've loved him since the preseason, and he played every down over Bradham. I used to be high. I was high on Bradham. I'm not high on Bradham now. I have to fade this guy until this situation really clears up. And it's still a little dangerous if you want to put your trust in one of these guys. I mean, hey, you put your trust in Brandon Spikes in week 1. You saw how that worked out. You put your trust in Bradham last week. You saw how that worked out. So for me, I'm fading that contest on that side. And then finally, Joe Hayden. Okay, another big game that we didn't talk about. 10 total tackles, 6 solo. We need to look a little bit deeper at this. If you watch the game, you know he was on Jimmy Graham. They were picking on Hayden, obvious size disadvantage for him, and he was getting tackles. I mean, hey, he was good coverage, but how are you gonna cover a guy who's that much bigger than you? It's just tough, and especially a guy who knows how to box you out. But he was finishing the plays, and that's why he got all the stats. So don't expect this to continue going forward. Don't expect big numbers out of Hayden in terms of tackles each week, and don't start him this week as well. So that is going to do it for us. We will be back again next week. Enjoy everything this weekend. Best of luck to you. Hopefully that prediction came true, and hopefully you win all of your games this week. So for Pro Football Focus, he's Ross Miles, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe, and that's a wrap.